Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Bargaehr, and welcome back to TM Conversations. I hope you've been joining us for all the sessions we're having on a continual basis on Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Our intent is to help bring together hot topics and current issues and things that will further all of our churches along the kingdom impact trajectory. Today, I'm excited because we're discussing a topic we call it the new normal. What stays, what changes, what goes. And we have some great pastors for you to hear from today. We have Pastor Neal Benson from Coastline Bible Church in Ventura. We have Pastor Kenneth C from down in that Yorba area of Orange County, which is north of me, but so good to have Pastor Kenneth with us. And also from Friendship Baptist. And we have Tom Mercer from High Desert Church in Victorville, where they have all the sand and none of the waves. But it's great to have all three of them with us today. And today also joining me is Paul Reinhard, who's the transitional pastor at the Hill in Riverside, previously First Baptist Church of Riverside. And he's going to help host this today. To get us started today a little bit, I wanted to give you a hand in how to record some notes and ask some questions today. So the Q&A section down at the bottom, you can actually click on that and ask any questions at any time during the webinar. Those that we don't cover during the sessions today, we'll also ask those and have our panelists today of our three distinguished pastors answer those. But as well, I want to give you something to actually record some information on. And so I'm going to pull up on the screen right now a chart that we use in our church health team. And I got this idea from reading Necessary Endings from Henry Cloud. And on the left, you'll see what stays. I'd like you to take a piece of paper, just kind of write this out there, because we're going to talk about what stays in the future. What are we doing well? What do we optimize? What's healthy right now? The next section is changes. What's I could call this what's sick in our church, what's confusing, what needs to be clarified. And then the what starts, these might be some new things, what's missing right now, things maybe to be planted and started. And then on the far right is the hardest thing for most churches is what stops. And I would call this what's dead, what's not working, what needs to be thrown out. And in this transition time, this is a great time to make these changes. Now, Henry Cloud based this on the parable that we see in John 15, not a parable, but talking about the true vine. And maybe there's some pruning that needs to get done in some of our churches. And he said this, and I'm going to quote it while you're finishing up, because at the bottom it says, nothing new can begin until something ends. I think that's so true in our own lives personally, but also in the lives of our churches. And he said it this way in his book: pruning is strategic. It is directional and forward-looking. It is intentional toward a vision, desires, and objectives that have been clearly defined and are measurable. If you have that, you know what a rose is. Again, think of this idea of pruning. And pruning will help you get one of true beauty. So I want to encourage you to actually make notes today. I'm going to do that. I printed this out for myself, and actually in those categories, that might be where you actually record some ideas down. And then I would encourage you, even after this session today, we use this in our church health team to actually help churches kind of refigure out where are they going in the next level of ministry. Where is the next season taking them? Maybe you use this with your strategic team. I love what, as we get started, Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So today, I'm excited to introduce to you a few of these TM pastors. And I want to introduce Dr. Paul Reinhard. Can I say doctor here, Paul? Would that be okay?
Let me unmute. Actually, my grandchildren say I'm a doctor, but not the kind that helps anybody.
Okay, so they must say something else about you that's encouraging. I know you spend a lot of time with them, but Paul, it's so good to have you here as the co-host today. And I just had a question. I know you've been doing some transitional work for us at First Baptist Church of Downey. You spent, I think, almost 2 years there, as I recall.
Almost 3 years there, yeah.
Yeah, and now you're at the Hill in Riverside. What kind of, just as observations, can you share about this new normal? What's different between what you're doing now and what you did before?
New normal as in transitioning or COVIDing?
I would say with COVID, and even in the transition, has COVID changed how you're doing transitional pastoring or your pastoring itself?
Absolutely. I've realized how much I love face-to-face and how important face-to-face conversations are, you know, how important let's go get a coffee, and learning to connect with people and try to stay connected, especially as a transitional pastor. You're trying to be a change agent. And when you're trying to be a change agent, relationship and trust is so critical to that. And so I'm finding it takes me double the intentionality to reach out and connect with people now as compared to when we're on campus or at worship or, you know, Bible study, small group, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I think we can all identify with that. And I know some people are even saying they're not Zoom busting anymore. They'd like to bust out of Zoom meetings and actually meet people face to face. Some of our churches are doing that and already opened. And we had a session last week about that called Regathering. But today we're going to talk more to this point of transitions from a standpoint of what are we going to change, what stays, and what do we need to stop? And hopefully they'll give us a kind of a vision of where our future is and where we're going. So let me take a moment. Thanks, Paul. I'm so glad you're with us, and introduce our first pastor, Pastor Neal Benson from Coastline Bible Church, who desperately wants a surfboard. So he's asked for donations today for anybody who would like to. I'm kidding, but I'm going to read a little bit of his introduction, if that's all right, Neal. I mean, you wrote this, so let me just kind of say it as it is. He was born in Los Angeles, raised in Big Bear Lake. Well, during his internship there, he met his wife, Charity, and I've met her. You have really married up, my friend. Fantastic young lady. They recently celebrated 15 years. They have 3 kids, Sophie, Leah, and Isaiah. He wants you to know that he loves a good carne asada burrito and is always looking for a great sushi place. So I think we can put some of that, maybe you can post some of those places right there in our Q&A today. But in his spare time, he dreams about hopping on a plane and checking out Australia with his family. That sounds like fun. Maybe we can all go along. He loves pretty much any sport as long as a board is involved. And of course, that comes back to the surfboard always, doesn't it, Neal? Mm-hmm. So he joined Coastline in 2007 as lead pastor, and he'd served at that church since 2003 and is passionate about helping people find and follow Jesus. So I'm so glad you're here, Pastor Neal. And how are you personally adjusting to all this season? Are you and your family doing okay?
Yeah, we're hanging in there, and it's been really tough. In addition to leading Coastline since 2017, actually, not 2007, but so we just celebrated 3 years here. But I'm also the principal at the Benson Academy. And, I just never thought that we would have our 3 kids at the house. And, so you're trying to write sermons somewhere in your home and your kids are enjoying schoolwork. That's been interesting. So
that's a whole new role for you, I'm sure. Unique.
Yeah,
and so,
yeah. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's been great, for everyone. We've had our hard times and our great times, and we've had times where we've lamented and grieved the loss, and we've had times where we've really enjoyed what the Lord is doing and teaching us.
Well, thank you for that authentic comment. I know a lot of us are making adjustments. Tell us about Coastline Bible Church and how you're adjusting to the new normal there, Neal.
Yeah. What we've said here is we've said that things change every 8 hours. And so it's been pretty unique, because I'm guessing other pastors have done this, is you make a decision and then something else happens within your city, your county, the state, the president says something. And so what we've really had to do is learn to be fast, fluid, and flexible, and not try to hold anything with gripped hands, but really hold things with our hands wide open is some of what we've really had to do. Yeah. So
could you share with us maybe some ideas on some of those ways you've been fast, flexible, nimble, that kind of comment, Neal?
Yeah. What I would actually love to share is I would love to phrase a lot of my time using 4 letters that a friend actually shared this with me. And I think we even have a graphic that we can throw up on the screen here for everyone to see. The letters are V, U, J, and L. One of my friends, when he talks about this, he calls it J-love. So it doesn't matter what order you have these in, but VUJL. And whenever I share these with people, they say, what does this mean? Well, I want you to think of these letters more as shapes. So don't think of them alphabetically, think of them as a shape. And so with V, what is going to come back quickly? What is something that we were doing pre-COVID that stopped that's going to come back quickly? Then the U is what is something we were doing that stopped, but it's going to take a while before it comes back. The J represents something that we really never did, but it's going to come back in this new season. And the L represents something you were doing that may never come back. So we're going to make this graphic available. I just want you to have an overview of this, to see this visually right now. And I want to just talk through these letters with us for a couple minutes here. So like, what is going to come back quickly? I think for every context, this is going to be different, but I'd like to share what's happening here at Coastline. One of the things that's coming back quick for us is small groups. Small groups is a way that if people feel comfortable, if people aren't experiencing any symptoms, that a small group can meet together. My small group was one of the first ones. We did the kind of guinea pig test on this. And I invited my guys over. We set up some chairs in the backyard. We said, hey, we think we're about 6 feet apart, and let's study God's word together. And I can't tell you just what it did for these guys. The comments that have already been said, people are zoomed out. They're sick of staring at a screen. And not that we could hug each other, not that we did hug each other, but we were able to open our Bibles together and enjoy each other's company that way. Another ministry that I would put under the V that could come back quickly for us is going to be student ministries. Our elders met a couple weeks ago and we said, hey, we think that our students can come back safely. We can meet the requirements that have been laid out by the authorities. And so our students can gather again. And let's be realistic. One, our students want to gather, and two, their parents want to get them out of their house. And so they're free to get out and do that. I think in this V category too, I'm going to put back our Sunday morning gathering. There's churches that are already gathering, and that's something that can come back quickly. I'm not saying it's going to look like it looked before March of this year, but it's one of the ministries, it's an outreach, however your model fits, that can come back quickly. I want to talk about the U now. What will come back slowly? Something that is going to come back slowly in my mind is children's ministry. So you have some parents that they're ready to get their kid out of their house, and you have some parents who say, hey, I'm not sure that I want my kid gathering yet. From the last that I've read, from what Governor Newsom has shared, is that we're not supposed to have children's ministry gather on its own. And so for us, even when our church gathers back together, children's ministry is going to be a lag. It's going to take some time till we can figure that out. I have 3 kids. I have an 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And you guys, I want to tell you, they've done so well at social distancing, but they're over it. And the longer they're with other kids, the less those boundaries stay in place. And so for us, we think children's ministry will be something that's going to take a while to come back. Something that I think is going to come back slowly too is for a church that has like a coffee time or a donut time or something like that. Prior to coming to Coastline, I was serving at a multi-site church, and the campus that I led, we had 3 services, 8 a.m., 9:30, 11:15. And at one point I said, hey, for our 8 o'clock service, let's just not have coffee there. You guys, I literally thought I was going to get fired. Like people were like, how can you have church without coffee? It was like incomprehensible to some of our other staff members. But as we look at this new season that we're moving into, I don't see us having this coffee donut time where, I mean, you guys already know this. You need to be the first person to the donut bar, because those little kids, they're licking their fingers and they're grabbing and they're picking one up and they're like, yeah, this doesn't look good. And they put that one down. And so you just got to be careful anyways. I tell people all the time, I drink out of water fountains to build my immune system. So that's what eating from the donut station is like doing. Another thing that we've talked about here at our church that's going to come back slowly is choir. So we have a seasonal choir. Our church is 98 years old. We've been in this community for a long, long time. And we had this thriving choir ministry for decades. Well, most recently, we've seen that kind of coming down because people are just having a hard time keeping all the commitments in their life. But another aspect that plays into that is a number of the people in our choir fall in a vulnerable population category. And so we as the leaders, we feel that it's our duty to shepherd and protect the flock. And so we don't want to say, hey, choir's firing back up right away, because we don't want them to get sick. So that's going to be something for us that's going to take a while until it comes back, and it will move seasonal. We'll move slowly into this. The next letter that I want to talk about is the letter J. And this is what's going to start or accelerate. There's things that you're doing now that you did not do before March 2020. Let me tell you these things for Coastline. One of them is online church. I'm sure everyone's going to talk about that today. Thanks for throwing that back up again. I appreciate that. Online church. Before March 2020, we were not doing online church. We were trying to move in that direction. When I got to Coastline, we had some cameras here, and they were all SD cameras. Some of you are like, what's an SD camera? Just ask your grandchild. They know what it is. It's poor quality. It's 480. And, you know, now you got 4K, which is like 1920 in its scope. It's significantly greater. And so we're looking at, what does it look like to continue online church? We have people in our church that have said, we're not going to come back until there's a vaccine. And so we want them to have a way to continue to gather with Coastline, to continue to worship the Lord. And I just want to make a note on this. If you're taking notes, will you please budget accordingly towards that? Budget to reach people who are going to be doing online church with you. What's going to accelerate? There's going to be new people. When you open your doors to regather again, you're going to have people show up at your church, and literally they could have been coming to your church for the last 14 weeks. You've never met them, and they're going to show up on your church campus. That's going to be an acceleration. Another acceleration for us is we just launched our church amp. On Sunday, we just launched our brand new Coastline app. And our people are thrilled because when we regather, we're not going to hand out a program. And so they can just pull out their phone. They're used to it already with the YouVersion Bible app, and they can give, they can watch a sermon while they're on vacation. They can see what's going on the calendar. You got all this stuff that's going on. I think something else that's really increasing right now in the letter J category is personal outreach. There is no better and no easier time to invite someone to church. For our church, we say this all the time. You can text someone at 8:55 and say, want to come to church with me at 9? And they don't have to shower, they don't have to eat, and they can still be in their pajamas and go to church with you. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the letter L. What will come back? Like, what will not come back? So what's never going to happen? And I want to slow down my speaking at this point. I know I can get excited. I know I can talk quickly, but I know your brain can keep up with me. But I want to slow down, because at this point, this is where we have to mourn the loss of some things that our church has been doing for a long time. There may be someone who has been coming to your church since it started, and they're going to say, Pastor, how come we're never doing, and you're going to fill in the blank. Now, some of you guys are stoked because there's 4 ministries that you've been trying to figure out how to get rid of, and this is your opportunity. Because in a post-COVID world, maybe 1, it's not safe, and maybe 2, you're saying, hey, this doesn't fit the mission of our church anymore. I'm not here to mock any of the ministries that you're doing. That is not my intention at all. Some God-fearing, Jesus-loving person started that ministry, but God has put you in a place to figure out what that looks like moving forward. I heard someone ask this question. They said, Neal, if you planted your church today, what would you do and what wouldn't you do? And that's another way to frame this thought, because any ministry that we have, we all know we have to put people, resources in it, and it takes time, it takes energy, and we have to ask ourselves, is this a priority, or is this something that drains us? So as we look to the future, what changes, what stays, what goes, the outline that Mark gave is great. I hope that what I am sharing too with VUJL just maybe gives you another way to think about it, a different way to think about it. And I'd like to end with this is I would really encourage you during this time, don't make a decision in a vacuum. Don't go lock yourself in your office, make all these decisions on your own. Bring your team in. Your team already knows what needs to stop. Your team knows what needs to start. Use the collective wisdom that God has placed around you. And there might be something that you want to do that you can give someone else credit for, and they would love to run with that and help. So that's all I got, Mark. Well, not really. I got more, but you know me, I'm a pastor. I could keep talking.
Well, we had one question on the screen here for you. Maybe you could answer it out loud. And then Paul, I think you might have a question, but who did Coastline use to create your app? And are there some companies that you looked at that you used for your app?
Yeah.
It's online.
That's a great question. I could actually, Mark, I'll find before this webinar is over, I'll find out who our guy is. But the person who creates our website sent us an email and said, if you guys go with an app right now, I'll waive the whole setup fee for you. And we just said, hey, in the last 15 weeks, we've spent no money on paper. We spent no money on coffee. We spent no money on donuts. Let's just redirect that and get the app fired up. But I can get that info from our office manager.
That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Paul, did you have another question for Neal?
I did. Neal, do you feel like this time is helping you or forcing you to clarify or sharpen your vision?
That's a great question, Paul. What really happened when I got to Coastline 3 years ago, I went into our first elders meeting, and I don't say this disrespectfully. Our elders know that I've shared this story before. And I said, hey guys, what's the mission of our church? And it went like this for about 30 seconds. And someone said, Larry, what does the binder say? And so Larry opened up the binder and he read a paragraph. And I said, do any of you guys have that memorized? And they said, of course not. I said, if none of us know it as the elders of this church, how do we expect our people to know that? And around that time, Doug Mai said, Neal, you got to read this book called The Unstuck Church. I'll put a link in the chat to it for anyone who wants to purchase it. I know Mark and the chat team have used it. And we went through The Unstuck Church and we really clarified the mission of our church. And I think today you could ask anybody and they would say the mission of Coastline is to help people find and follow Jesus.
Amen. Amen.
Well, thank you, Neal, for that. I know we also did the StratOps process with you. I remember we had some strategic leaders there taking that Unstuck process, and I seen a real clarification of your mission and some real changes there. Appreciate your insights today. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So we're going to take a poll at this time. I'm going to have Lena, if you could put that up on the screen. And this is just kind of an idea of what are some of the things you're thinking of changing. So if we could see that up on the screen there, here we go. While I'm talking, you can fill this in. What are you considering at this time for new ministry in your church or in the future? You can vote for 3 here: new digital platforms, new small group format, different ways to care for people, bridges to break down walls of culture, race, and gender with Jesus' love, smaller services that are more personal, larger services that reach more people, reallocating staff to the new normal emphasis. I don't know yet, just trying to survive. And last one, considering retiring, going to heaven soon because this is crazy hard. Just answer those 3 if you, just vote for 3 if you would, and then we'll look at the results of that in just a moment. Hopefully this will kind of give us, again, some clues on what people are thinking in our churches. And while you're looking at that, I want to remind you, these webinars go on every week. Had a great session last week on regathering. The week before that, we talked about transitions with Terry Walling. It was so insightful. And one of our most attended events on webinars so far was about racism, repentance, and reconciliation. And Pastor Kenneth, who's here today, and Pastor Ivan Pitts just led a great session for us to listen to and learn from and understand and take a new view how we love one another. We're going to have another session like that coming up on July 7th. It's called A Candid Conversation About Racism and Repentance. Two people you'll want to hear on this. One is Jack Hamilton. He's the, I guess, semi-retired or almost retired executive pastor from High Desert Church. And he's going to be here, as well as Albert Tate. And I just heard Albert speak on this topic. If some of you have not heard Albert before, you are in for a treat. And he will, this is so good. He, on Mondays, there's a session put on by Carrie Newhoff and David Kinnaman that I listen to every week at noon. And they had two speakers. Albert was one of them. Fantastic. About this topic. So I'd encourage you, again, to plan on being here next week for that. If we could see the results of this, I think we're about done at this point. Elena, could you put that up? And let's see what people are thinking. They're all retiring. We're in trouble. All right. Here we go. New digital platforms, 82%. Oh, that's fantastic. Good. And I know a lot of you have been thinking about that for a long time, but you've been forced to it at this point. But that's good. New small group format, 64%. That's good. Unstuck just did a quarterly review. They said 70% of churches are now having small groups digitally, which was a fantastic discipleship engagement plan, and that's good. Different ways to care for people. Bridges to break down walls of culture, got 18%. Smaller services, larger services, okay. We see some results there. Reallocating staff to the new normal emphasis. That kind of goes along, Neal, with your comment about how do we budget for things, which would be different. I don't know, just trying to survive. Nobody was willing to answer those last two I put in there. Okay, you know, by the way, I should have told you your names don't go on this, but that's okay. I know I talked to a lot of pastors, and there's some frustration about, you know, all that's going on and so quickly coming at us. This is a hard time to do pastoring. I can't think of another time where it's been harder, but we're in this together, and that's good news. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you, I'm going to have Pastor Paul introduce Pastor Kenneth Curry, and we'll hear some ideas from Pastor Curry.
Kenneth, it's good to be with you and listen to you today. I always enjoy it when you speak. You're always exciting and challenging. But I'm going to cheat just like Mark did and share your bio. And here it goes. Pastor Kenneth Curry is the pastor of Friendship Baptist Church of Yorba Linda. He assumed the helm in 2013 when the church's only pastor, Bishop James D. Carrington, retired after 48 years of service. So Kenneth, no small shoes for you to fill in that case.
No, sir.
Therefore, he is only the second pastor in Friendship's 56-year history. Friendship is one of the largest predominantly Black Baptist churches in North Orange County, with many congregants who travel from surrounding cities, other counties, to experience God in the faith community, affectionately known as the Ship. Kenneth strives to serve the kingdom of God with excellence while leading Friendship into its fullness of purpose in God's fullness of time. Kenneth attended Oral Roberts University, Golden Gate Seminary, and I'll be praying for you as you're working on your doctorate in advanced preaching at Biola. Good luck and God bless on that. And then last but surely not least, Pastor Kenneth is married to Karima. They have two adult sons, Daniel and Darnell. Kenneth, talk to us.
Cool. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Mark and Paul, and of course, Willie. I appreciate being invited to the conversation to share this platform with Neal and Tom. I frame leadership for me right now in three ideas, especially as we travel through this thing known as COVID-19. And I don't think we've hit normal yet. I don't know if we've hit the bottom to figure out what normal will be. I do think it's always evolving and changing. And so these three things that I frame, number one is flexibility, knowing that things are going to change. I announced something to my congregation one week, and the next week I'm pulling back. And I think that they understand that. I'm being as honest and open with them as I can. So flexibility is important. And then creativity as I lead staff, I'm really challenging them to think outside the box. And it's hard when you're, for lack of a better term, a traditional church, you're used to doing things a certain way. In this sense, COVID has been good for us. The challenge of it, because it's challenged our creativity, challenged us to think about things differently. One of the things now is, how can you do everything virtually, and what it takes, what the planning takes, just looking at it very differently, and it makes us think outside the box. And then finally, it's clarity. And Paul, you kind of touched that idea of clarity when you asked Neal if he needed to clarify vision. One of the things I've learned is that where possible, I want to continue to cast vision, remind us of who we are, go back to our mission, vision, and our values. Remind our people that we are still the church. We just don't meet together. And I say that over and over again, encouraging connections where I can. So flexibility, creativity, clarity, and in clarity, not only is that clarifying vision, but communication. One of the things that I don't, and it's on my list for what stays, is that I do a weekly video to the membership, and it's worked for me. I do a weekly email to them, and it's worked for me. But I have people that look forward to it. It's a connection with the pastor. And so there's some things that I have walked away with that they get to hear my voice. And for our church, I pastor Friendship, so I don't know other churches. But for our church, what I have found in this season is that our people need to know that their pastor is in this with them. It's easy. I appreciate what Neal says. It's easy for me to let go of some of the other stuff and teach and lead the people, lead that staff and members, but also to be available. That they're not just hearing from Governor Newsom. They're not just hearing from the local health authorities. So they get to hear their pastor frame this for them, and then move forward from there. So that's my big arch of ministry. And if there's nothing that anybody wants to ask me, I want to drill down and talk about my three things, or those areas. Is that okay, Paul? Of what stays, what goes. And so for me, that idea of what stays is worship. I move from even calling us church so much as I call us a worship community, that we are still a worship community. We worship virtually, we worship online. And so that stays. Worship stays. It's not going anywhere. We may have to figure out how to do it differently and make it look different, but it stays. And we use, at our church, we use Google Meets. All of our email and stuff is done through the Google Suite. And so we have perfected and are working through. It's not as advanced. Zoom is like the gold standard, right? But we are working with Google Meet and branding it with our ministry. So we tagged on to something and we say, this is our thing, and I'm committed to it. I have some leaders that use Zoom, but if there's anything that's big picture, I prefer us to use Google Meets and then standardize it throughout the ministry. Online presence, as Neal said, that stays. It's not going anywhere. For African Americans, we are a high-risk category. I do still have some older members, and so and they're great supporters of our church. Financially, we've been good in terms of where we are, and so I'm grateful for them. Because of them, we've been really good, fixed incomes, etc. But they said, Pastor, we've done a survey. They're like, Pastor, we're not coming back until there's a vaccine or things are safe. We know you're doing your best to make sure that we stay safe, but we need some time. We want to take this seriously. And so I want to do everything I can to create online presence and connection. And we had started our journey, Neal, about 3 years ago with our app and with our website. All that stuff is synced together. Just so you all know, we use Subsplash. So Subsplash does our website as well as our app. And when we started, my people fought me. They felt like, I was planning for the church for the future, and they were right, and not planning, there was a lot of technology, and that's what they were saying as pastors, too much technology, too fast. But when this hit, the overwhelming response that I got was, Pastor, we're grateful you were already there, that you didn't have to pivot. I was already online already. We pre-record our service, so that was a different space for me. But other than that, our people were ready. We took time before we launched the app, before we launched the website. We took time where even with our older members, we had time on Sunday. You could stop by a table or a booth. We show you how to put on your notifications. When we first did it, we did not send out a lot of notifications so that we wouldn't, overdo it. Now, we have 100% participation in notifications. People aren't cutting them off. And we do a lot more notifications now because there's just information that has to get out, but it's working for us. So those are things that stay. I can't figure out how things are going to come back. You hear one thing, you see another, but I try to stay ahead of it along with my team. And I know that things that will go for us will be some of the stuff we always gather around food, and the direction is some of that has to kind of pull back. That will go for us. Not being aware in terms of our risk. Some of that is some of the things that just awareness, allowing ourselves to be unaware is not an option. We have to be aware. We have to think through our physical distancing, all that kind of stuff, awareness and conversations with people. In terms of what goes, I have not worked through everything that's leaving us just yet, but I know that we're up for flexibility. And back to my overarching that if something doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. I have a longer list of things that change. Like Neal, we at Friendship, we are a choir church. I have 7 choirs. And those are my biggest connections in our church. I have a choir for every Sunday, and then I have 2 choirs on the 4th Sunday, a special men's choir and a special women's choir. I have choirs like nobody's business. And so what I've challenged the choirs to do is keep connecting with your people, because it's a big piece. And we haven't had a cutoff in terms of, when I came to Friendship, I thought it was madness, but they really had a method to their madness in terms of rehearsals and how they meet and all that stuff. There's a rehearsal literally here in normal time every day of the week. And so it will change. And choirs, back to clarity, we are communicating to choirs that we don't know when you're coming back, how, even as we're not ready to come back, you can only have 100, but we're doing live tapings now. We invite certain groups each week to come, and if they don't feel safe, they don't need to come. It gives us a chance to test what we're doing, but we're giving them an opportunity to stay connected. So choirs will change. I want to move quickly. We used to have a greeting time where we, hugged each other and kissed, and we stopped that as soon as this started, but that will look different. I'm also thinking about how we do our sanctuary. We have pews. So there's been a suggestion. We've done a survey with our people, and people seem open that they'd be willing to help us raise the money to get chairs and get rid of the pews. And so this may be the time to do that, because people understand we're trying to keep them safe. I'm big on maximizing the moment. If people understand this is what's going to keep everyone safe, they will buy in, participate, help us raise the money, reallocate funds. And so service layout may be different, but here's my big one. My biggest thing that I've been working on since I came to Friendship, not just to be the pastor 7 years ago, now as a member and serving on staff almost 20 years, was the length of our service. I just wanted to pause because that's a big deal. The length of our service. Our service is generally 2 hours long. We have gotten this service online down to 75 minutes or less. And every conversation that I have is that we have to get service shorter. And I finally have the buy-in where people understand that. So that's a big change. This Sunday, not only did we have regular service, we were able to celebrate we do a big college event, not college, high school graduation and scholarship event. We did all of that in about 85 minutes, which would have taken us 2 days. It would have been Sunday service and then that event. So they understand that we can actually get this stuff done in a different way, save some time. And you all know, if you've been to a African-American service, that's a big deal. Get down to 75 minutes. I'm not gonna get down to 60. I understand that, but 75, I'm good. So those are things that I'm working on and perfecting. It's a moving target, but we're making progress. You're muted, Paul, so I don't know.
Said amen.
Amen.
Kenneth, I'm just going to say my professor at Eastern, my preaching prof, Gerald Lamont Thomas, was a black Southern Baptist preacher.
Yes, sir.
And he told all of us, he said, you white boys have done been cheated by God. Because if we even thought 2 hours, we would be in deep, deep weeds.
Right, right. Well, we had done 2 hours for a while, and we're pulling back. And so that I think people are excited about those possibilities. There's great excitement. I'm grateful for my people encouraging me through this. They realize I didn't learn how to lead in a pandemic in seminary. And so they've given me grace, but they are also very appreciative for what we've been able to accomplish. And so, I don't want to say I have carte blanche, but I have opportunity. And so I'm still reevaluating and looking at what we can change.
Mark, could I throw a question at Kenneth?
Sure.
All right. Kenneth, you said a lot of great things, but you said something that really tweaked me. And so I'd like to kind of push you on it and see where it goes. You said thinking ahead. And I wrote down here proactive. And then my question is, and I'm fishing here, do you try to get your staff thinking ahead? Do you try to get your staff thinking proactively, not reactively? And if so, how do you do that?
And so, yes, I do. The other issue of being here as long as I've been, I've held almost every position that there was here and now the senior pastor. So my staff really depends on me more than what we probably should. And so now the conversation is, I can't keep up the pace. And so I need you to be thinking about what happens if we go back. We had gotten some ability to gather, but now that we go backwards, what are things that you can do to grow your ministry? What if things got tight and we can't meet? And so I really try to get them to think that way, and then think, if I'm not available, how are you able to lead? And then how do we still grow the church, right? How do we still do the mission and bring people to know Jesus? Ours is very simple: evangelism, discipleship, and service. How do we still make those things happen? And are the things you're doing in ministry lining up? So as we've had to cut stuff, does this line up with who we are and even back to our values?
Amen. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pastor Curry. I just feel like we're just kind of getting the tip of the iceberg here with each one of you. I know there's a lot more. In fact, you probably had 75 minutes or 2 hours worth here.
No, not today. I want to hear from Tom Mercer. So I was trying to.
I so appreciate your thoughts, though, Kenneth.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for being here and sharing. Pastor Paul, we're going to pull up the next poll online, and I'd like you to read through that and have people kind of take that and then make some announcements as we go. Could you do that? And Elena, if you'd put that up on the screen, let's take that second poll. Are we there, Elena? Do you have that second poll ready for us? Just pull that up, and then Paula have a chance to read through that. That would be great.
All right.
And if we don't get there in the next 30 seconds, we'll just keep going on. No problem.
Do, 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 do. Here we go. All right. What are the most important in the coming days to change and shift to the new normal from your perspective? Vote for your top 3, and this is multiple choice. Shift from analog to digital. And all God's people said amen. Shift from teaching to equipping. Shift from gathering to connecting. Shift from a focus in mission global to mission local. Shift from our spending to generosity. Overspending to generosity. shift from complexity to simplicity, shift from attendance, i.e. viewers, to engagement, none of the above, all of the above.
So while you're looking at that and doing that, I'll just remind you, there's some resources on our website. Any of these webinars you've missed, or for instance, Neal's VUJC, I think it was, that you put on the board. I might have missed one of the letters, L. Okay. That will be online, and this webinar will be online in the next 2 days. So anything you've missed and want to go back to, or look at some of the resources that are available right there for you. And Paul?
Mark, I was going to add real quick. Neal mentioned the book Unstuck by Tony Morgan, and we are reading through that with the board and the staff on the Hill right now. And that is so explosive. And I would just encourage pastors that if you're in a situation where you might not feel it's necessarily safe to have certain conversations with your board, and if you just want to be devious and Machiavellian, not that I would ever be that, but you can innocently say, wow, there's this great book, let's read it, and let's begin to tick off some metrics, and let's see where our church fits in this pattern. And as you go, you know, up the life cycle, and everybody's like, yeah, we're not there. And then when you start down the life cycle, and if you're like a couple of churches I've worked with, you know, when you're on your way down the life cycle and the board begins to go, oh my gosh, this is us. Then as a pastor, you can sit there and innocently say, wow, that's a wise and insightful observation. What do you think we should do about that? And I'm being a little bit smart aleck here, but Neal, I'm amening that book. It is fantastic, and you can get so much mileage out of it.
Yeah. Well, let's take a thank you for that reminder, and let's take a look at the poll. Maybe you can help us see that, Paul, and walk us through it.
All right. So let's see. We have 71% shift from gathering to connecting.
Wow.
That's huge.
That's a big move.
And then we have 71% shift from attendance to engagement. And then what's interesting is the next one drops really all the way down to 50%, complexity to simplicity. Frankly, I think Tom preached on that at the last conference. And then again, 43 shift from teaching to equipping. But it's interesting, we used the word earlier, relationship, and that's really what it's about, connecting and engaging and simplifying.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Well, I hope that gives you some ideas to think about. And I think this third pastor that we'll be speaking with, Pastor Tom, so good to have you with us today. We put you up last because we got to end in 5 minutes, and I hope that's no, I'm kidding. We are not ending in 5 minutes. We are all anxious to hear some of your ideas. So most of you know Pastor Tom from High Desert Church out in the sands of Victorville, and they have 4 campuses now. Maybe you can share with us some of what's changed with campus ministry and some of that. We'd love to hear that. But I know you spend a lot of time, in fact, the majority of your time, talking about oikos. And that's really one of the, I would say, the largest mission and vision of your church of how to accomplish what you're doing. It's one of the reasons for the growth. And I understand you have a conference coming up actually in October, a national oikos conference, the 22nd and 23rd. And then also on the 13th of coming up here, you have some oikos training happening up at your church as well. I guess you're continuing those even in the middle of COVID. So we're so good to have you here. And you describe yourself as, I saw this on your website, I think. He's a husband, father, grandfather, pastor, mentor, and my mission is to help prepare you for yours. I love that, Tom. You are just an equipper, and we so appreciate you being here today. So thank you. Share with what's going on in your world and what's happening at High Desert and with you.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I'm always blessed to spend some time with the TM team. And then when I read that they locked me in with Neal and Kenneth, that was an extra blessing. It's always an honor to to say anything. You know, what stays, what goes, and what changes are, some of our team heard the title of the webinar and they immediately saw 3 categories of staff members. You guys need to go, you guys get to stay, and you guys have to change. But that obviously is not what we're talking about. I'm thinking this conversation that we're having today, Mark, should probably happen in, you know, every 3 months or so, because things do change so quickly. I'm not sure we know anything really yet about what the future holds. We certainly don't know how many people are coming back to church, and not back quickly. It seems that most churches that I've talked to are seeing about 20 to 30% of their prior attendance for those who are meeting again in person. That's how many are even showing interest in coming back sooner than later. And I'm sure that'll ramp up more as restrictions by the government are lifted. But with churches becoming more and more proficient online, I think we should all get ready to minister to some permanent remote parishioners. And I think most are going to return. I was in a meeting yesterday. I do think there will be a very high percentage of people that over time will come back, but because we ramped up so quickly to become so good at deploying our services online, in the long-term picture, we may become the victims of our own proficiency. And so I'm anticipating that as being something that will definitely change. For us right now, you know, if we weren't in this pandemic still, the summer would be peppered with meetings about next year's budget. And in our budget preparation conversations every year, we have what we call our not to-do list conversation. That is, what has snuck into our structure or our systems that is not mission critical, which means it needs to be it needs to be terminated, especially before it becomes another institution in our church that later on we're going to regret having, because it sucks up so much bandwidth and staff attention and budget. And so we would have a lot of conversations right now about what has snuck into our ministry that we should have never allowed in, because the sooner we rid ourselves of, better off we're going to be. You know, you mentioned a few minutes ago, Mark, that, you know, you want to try to identify what's working in your church. We have been able to do a lot of things over the years that work well and are very popular and people want to participate in, but they're not mission critical. And so we have to terminate some of the most successful things we do in order to stay on mission. But at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, we had all these people coming to 4 campuses, and we're not sure what our church is going to look like in a few months. And so really, we're just going to carry, I think the thinking now is we're just going to carry our 2020 budget well into 2021 and just see what happens. And if we have to reallocate staff, if we have to adjust our ministry to meet the need of the moment, then, you know, you got to do what you got to do. But one thing that is bound to change, and I appreciate what Neal and Kenneth both contributed to this conversation, is how much money we put into online ministry is going to change. And how much more money, of course, that's still up in the air. But pre-COVID, we referred to our online presence as an online service for our online audience. And we simply streamed the live services. We did a pretty good job with it because we had good equipment. But we just streamed our live services that occurred every weekend at our broadcast site. And that's our original site, our Victorville site. And so we had a definite HDC Victorville campus vibe, not an all HDC vibe. And so we saw online as an on-ramp to attending one of our campuses. That was the purpose of our online presence, or for people who might have been out of town, you know, just wanted to take in the service, not miss the service. Matt Steen was staffing chemistry.com. He would have called us pre-COVID a Category 3 online church. That is a building feeder church. We used online to feed our campuses. But now we're going to lean, I think, into becoming more of a Category 4 online church, which is a campus launcher church. That's his terminology. And so we're looking at how we could create a dedicated ministry team to design a more significant online community that might be led by its own pastor and staff, and essentially become one of our campuses to serve a more permanent online congregation. And we kind of go into that kicking and screaming because that's a huge shift for us philosophically. But I just have been listening to some of the good thinkers on this topic, and you guys have hosted some of them, and I think that's going to be the future. Another thing, I'll just be real brief on this one. Another thing that might change is, and something we're not real excited about, is the way we office our team. Because of working remotely, you know, for 4 months, we have a fairly large team, and a lot of them really like that. And we haven't allowed our staff to do that really ever. We're a 4-campus church, and we work hard to maintain our identity as one church. And so we actually office all 4 campuses, office the staffs of all 4 campuses at one place. But the COVID virus has required a reality that some of our team members have really embraced, and maybe even to an unhealthy degree. But we're going to have those conversations and figure out if that's going to affect our long-term plan there. And I also want to just say, again, hopefully briefly, the racial tension recently has created new opportunities for us. And it's not just COVID. And so we're responding to that as well. We've been pretty intentional about adding color to our staff in recent years, our board, certainly our worship stage. And these events recently have shown us the high value of that. And it's something that we've taught on consistently. We've taught on justice issues when the biblical text raises them. And we tend to teach through the scriptures faithfully and pretty consistently. And so even though I think we've been on top of much of that, I do think that embracing this conversation with new intentionality is a really good idea. And I think that's going to frame a long-term strategy for us as we continue with that. And then the thing that doesn't change, Mark, you could predict this, is our oikocentric ministry. I've always maintained the pastors are too enamored with our stages, and remote church has done nothing to dampen that very unhealthy enthusiasm. To be honest with you, it's just changed the stage from being watched by a live audience to one that is being watched by a remote audience. I think a lot of churches didn't know what their ministry was centered around until the pandemic took it away. And so we have recentered our ministry on just a different kind of stage. And whether it is a remote virtual stage or a physical in-person stage, I think we just placed too high a value on facilities. And one of the things that I was real excited about when the pandemic hit, because we had to look for something to be excited about, right? And one of the things I was excited about was the fact that this is finally going to cause us to face up to the fact that church is not something that requires stages. It's not something that requires buildings, but that 95% of kingdom building takes place through relationships. And so the pandemic, whether it's here or not, pandemic or not, 95% of spiritual transformation takes place in virally. And the pandemic has done really very little to stop those 8 to 15 people who we metaphorically say are sitting on the front row seats of your life, they still have been on the front row seats of our people's lives. And even though many of those connections have been virtual connections, it's still something that has taken place. And so, in all honesty, the mission of HTC hasn't slowed down much over the last 4 months, because our mission was centered on those relationships rather than on the gatherings that we share on the weekends.
Well, Tom, thanks for sharing those big ideas in a short period of time, but yet they're so impactful. I love what you said. We may become the victims of our own efficiency or proficiency, online. None of us know how that's going to end up. We know there's some churches like Craig Goshel's church that grows like crazy out of some crazy place named Oklahoma, but he's ministering all over to people and having big value with it. And yet other churches are doing great with on-site, and there certainly will be some change. We just don't know exactly what it's going to be. We're all kind of following God, preaching the word, giving the gospel, staying oikos-centric, realizing that racial tension is saying that we need that to be in the forefront, not in the back, and that we need to be more intentional, even though we preach through it. How do we do it even more than just having people on stage? How do we actually live it out in love with our brothers and sisters? Oh, such rich stuff you brought to us, Tom. Thank you. Thank you. So appreciate that.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah. So, well, I hope all of you have gotten some great ideas today on where we're going, or where we could be going, or where we might be going. And that, again, we go back to how tightly are we staying with our Savior, Jesus Christ, and have that tight relationship so that He directs us, and where we start new things, where we end things, where we change things. But mostly, how can we be still the transforming power, the unstoppable church that God's called us to be? And I don't know, Neal, Kenneth, Tom, if you have any final comments, certainly Pastor Paul as well, from just walking through this, just chime in here as any final thoughts you want to give before we sign off today.
I got one thing, Mark, if I might just say or show. I'm not as tech savvy as Neal. I didn't know to send the document to you so we could put it on the screen, so I'm just going to show it to you. Something that when a frantic pastor about 3 or 4 months ago, and we had a number reach out to us asking us what we thought about it, what was going on. And so I added a little graphic to all of my email responses, and this is it.
Relax, Pastor. It's not your church.
That's a good word. That's a good
Great
word.
message, Tom.
We can all just take a deep breath and recognize that Jesus is still large and in charge.
Oh, and if I can extend that a little, this summer, take a summer off, Pastor. Somewhere in here, make sure you take your Sabbath and you get away. I'm doing the same. I'm looking for how do I make that work between everything. But all this, we really need to take some time away and be refreshed with the Spirit. So thanks for that reminder, Tom. It's not our church. Thanks.
Mark, the last thing that I would just encourage in this is to lead with mission. You know, Jesus gave us very clearly the Great Commission. Lead with that, and that like what Tom said is even better than what I said. But I just had that on my notes written down, and I highlighted it.
Thanks, Neal. Thanks. Pastor Curry, any final thoughts?
My last thing, I go back to that whole idea of flexibility. I think that Tom said it great, and that idea, even with budget and the future, we don't know where the bottom is. I don't think we've reached what normal is going to be. But as Tom said, as if we're flexible in our planning and consideration as things come up, we will be able to address them head on. And that, I think, one of the things this has taught me is not to take myself so seriously, right? Because we become professional at doing church, that we're overstressed, overpressed. But that flexibility piece reminds us that we can decide to go this way or that way, and stay focused with it. So.
Well, thank you, each one of you. Paul, you have any final words? No?
I think you unmuted me. One, if I may. You know, Tom, as you were sharing, you said permanent remote parishioners. And you know, Ralph Neighbor was my D-Min mentor. And Ralph used to basically say, if you kill every program except worship, small groups, and oikos, then the church will come alive.
Yeah.
And it's almost like COVID-19 has done that. It has reduced us to you know, large group worship and small groups and oikos. And I know it sounds pretty simple-minded, but I get this idea of a dandelion. And when you were kids, you ever picked up a dandelion and blew on it and the seeds just went everywhere. And real quick, my kids work at a church, and they just hit 3.3 million online IP addresses. And their team that does this is rapidly asking the question, how do we plant life groups at these IP addresses? How do we plant churches at these IP addresses? And they're being forced to shift their thinking from how do we gather people to how do we send and release the gospel to be the gospel.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's almost like God's put us in that scattered, you know, book of Acts, book of James kind of a place.
Yeah.
And as scary a time as it is, it's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, it's a great observation, going from gathering to scattering as Acts was, and all of us are on that page. Maybe the online is the part of that. And maybe there's some other things, but this is an opportunity for transitions, for change, and for the church to be the hope of the world that Jesus has called us to be. I so want to say thank you. So grateful for Pastor Neal, Pastor Kenneth, and Pastor Tom, and Pastor Paul being here today and sharing great ideas. It's helping our creative thinking. It's helping us think outside the box. And it reminds me how thankful I am to be part of this ministry. With all of us, we're all better together, because with each of our minds, with each of our ministries, with all of our hearts, we can serve the Lord with all of our strength. And so thank you for being here today. Thanks for you that have joined us today. We're grateful for you being here. We'll be back next week. Don't forget, we'll be talking about racism and repentance, and that'll be with Albert Tate and Jack Hamilton. You won't want to miss that, 1 o'clock. Stay tuned. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks to everybody. See you next week.
Amen.
All right. Have a great day.
Blessings.